Welcome, everyone, to a wonderful Worthy Incubator this afternoon with the wonderful Jill McPherson talking about how to fall in love with your job again. Who wouldn't love that title? Find out what's really at the core of your challenges and what to do about it. Now, Jill has been a teacher for more than 25 years, kindergarten through eighth grade, special education in the arts, and she provides invaluable experience addressing children's needs and behaviors. She has a degree in child psychology from the University of Guelph and a Bachelor of Ed from Brock University, as well as training in counseling and nonviolent communication, of which she speaks so passionately. Obviously, I'm a big fan. Jill, welcome. Good to have you with us.
Well, thank you. It's good to be back. I always enjoy talking with you, Walter.
It's always fun.
Yeah, it is. It
So
is.
you've teased us, you've got us interested. We're here, we're ready to learn. Talk to us about nonviolent communication and how you can shift how you're thinking and feeling about your job.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was the huge game changer for me when
Yes.
I always say when nonviolent communication found me. It helped me to love my job again, and it helped me to realize how so many of my belief systems, back and training and teachers college days, was contributing to so many of my challenges. So if you want, I can just start by
Please.
my slideshow. And
Yeah, no, very excited to hear the story. And I
yeah,
mean, you and I have talked, I know the story, but I really want you to share this with everyone.
yeah, yeah. Well, and you did a great job at introducing me there. That's starting off with my years of teaching experience. And
Yes.
um, I think one of the things that I also want to add in there is that I have four children, and when my youngest started kindergarten, my
Yeah.
original plan had been that, like a lot of moms, once the kids are in school full time, then I'll go back full time.
Right.
And at that time, I had different, personal things happening in my life where I needed some more, I had surgery, and then
Right.
led to some more emotional and mental support and
Sure.
counseling, and sort of the whole um, paradigm of like how mental health and physical health and emotional health are all interconnected. And so I started, a learning journey on the side. And instead of going back teaching, I started getting training and counseling through my own experiences. And one of the modalities I did eventually find was nonviolent communication, a school of thought founded by a man named Marshall Rosenberg.
Yes.
So that I was doing that alongside the last 8 years of teaching. And so I had the privilege of applying what I was learning directly into the classroom as I was taking courses. It was direct application. And so I have those 8 years of lived experience in teaching, in living and teaching with nonviolent communication, which was a huge game changer, not just in the classroom for me, but in, my personal life as well.
And
So,
really, just a big note there for everyone who's watching, because I'm sure we have a range of ages and generations participating and listening. Um, Big memo, life is not easy. Things happen. We start out teaching, we think we know where our career is going, and things happen. And the way we respond to them and the way we decide to frame them and make it our personal narrative has a lot to do with what we're talking about.
absolutely, absolutely. We're going to talk a lot about those narratives that are actually contributing to so much stress in teaching today.
Yeah.
And so, how to fall in love with your job again. I think what I really want to just make clear is this isn't going to be those strategies, like, not that they aren't helpful, but my experience in anything around helping teachers to not be stressed is focuses on self-care, sort of the things you can do outside to survive inside. You know,
Nice.
it's it's a jungle in there,
Yeah.
so you've got to like meditate and take yoga classes and eat well and get sleep, and those are all very valid, and they are of course really important. And but what I'm talking about is the shift in what you can do when you are in the jungle. And so first of all, I'll just like start by kind of putting it out to your audience of like, what makes the joy of teaching harder to hold on to some days? Like, you got into, most people, not everybody, but I think most people in the teaching profession got into the teaching profession because they wanted to make a difference. They wanted to do contribution in the context of teaching children, or young adults. And so a lot of us entered, teachers college with that dream of like making a difference to young people's lives. And
Yes.
then we found out there was a lot more to the job. And so I'm curious, I don't know if any of your audience has responded to that question, or you can share one yourself, Walter, back in the day when you were in the classroom, like what made it hard to enjoy your job?
Well, I think for me, and you just made me think as you were describing that, the things they can't teach you in college. And at the time I went to Ohio State, which was like one of the top teacher training programs back then. And yet when I got into the job, there were just so many variables I couldn't plan for. And of course, the biggest one as a rookie is classroom management. I was a male in middle school, and so they gave me all the tough cases. I was the only man on the team. So all the boys that needed talks about the facts of life, personal hygiene, fighting, safety, um, and I wasn't prepared for any of that. And it really wore me out fast. By Christmas of my first year, I was really questioning if I had the wherewithal to keep up with everything coming at me.
Mm, yeah, for sure. That's a lot of different struggles with, managing behavior, supporting, you know,
Yeah.
individuals in making different choices, and yeah,
Yes. Yes.
it can be a lot for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and my experience is, when I talk to educators, or when I do workshop for educators, after we kind of talk about all those things that are stressing them out about the job, maybe lack of support from administration, difficult parents, kids fighting, not doing their work, not completing assignments, all these things kind of come up when we start saying the things that we don't enjoy about the job. And
Yeah.
one of the things um, that I also point out is that, I don't know about you, Walter, but when I was a student, like people talk about the changes, like back when, kids were more, compliant, or there wasn't as many behavior issues.
Right.
And as painful as it is to see more challenging behaviors, my, new frame that I would start to offer people as, instead of seeing this as something like, bad or something's gone wrong, but to see it as the shift in paradigm that needs to start happening in education. When we were younger, compliance and conformity was the name of the game. And it still actually is, in my experience, the foundation of institutional education. When
Yeah.
someone decided it was a great idea to have one adult and 20 some kids in a room, compliance and conformity is almost a necessity for survival for
Yeah.
pretty much everybody involved. It's hard to kind of run an individualized, program for everybody and meet
Hmm.
everybody's needs.
Hmm.
And so there's definitely that. And one of our biggest struggles now is starting to question the belief systems and the paradigms in which institutional education has been built on. And what I start to invite people to realize is that we have a whole new generation of children that have come to the planet and who don't value compliance and conformity in the same way. When I was a kid, I would give a sacrifice, any sort of choice or self agency for love and approval from an adult,
Yep.
to prevent any sort of punishment,
Yep.
right? It was like jump how high. And now we have a generation of children who are valuing more self agency and choice over compliance and conformity. So you get those kids who are saying, send me to the office, I don't care, because they really don't, because they will deal with those consequences and stay true to themselves.
Mhm.
And so rather than thinking about how can we have harsher consequences, how can we have greater punishments, what are we going to do about these defiant, disobedient children? What are we going to do about a system that values obedience, compliance, conformity? And then we complain when these children leave a system and they're not problem solvers. They don't have initiative. They don't know how to communicate with other human beings. They don't have conflict, mediation skills. And because those skills aren't required if you do compliance and conformity well, it doesn't
Yes.
really ever come up.
Yeah.
Right. So A lot of it, I'm just right from the start, right out of the gate, I'm inviting educators to start shifting instead of thinking, the sky is falling, why can't it be back to the good old days?
Yeah,
Mine is yay. And I realize it's painful. It's a painful yay. But unfortunately, humans seem to only learn and grow through painful situations.
yeah,
When things are going ticky boo, we tend to be just, blind, going along.
right.
But it's in our painful moments that we learn and grow. And I think institutional education has a lot of learning to do right now when we see all of these, things that we're navigating that are so challenging.
Well, and to even extend this point a little further, because, and we've been talking about this in prepping for today, that I had mentioned to you, the Worthy Educator is talking a lot about the transformation of education and meeting the needs of children where they are today. And children where they are today expect to lead, exactly as you were saying. They want to show us the way. They're not sitting there waiting for us to tell them.
Hmm.
And if you're going to be the authority figure, that only works if they're willing to play the game. You can be
Hmm.
the authority figure up and down every way you know. If the students are more independent and wanting to pursue their own agency, you're going to lose. You're
Hmm.
not going to win that power struggle. So that's
Exactly.
a real incentive to say, okay, well then how do I change my thinking?
Right.
Yeah,
Right. And the power struggle comes from the hierarchical paradigm we have, not just in education, but in most workplaces, and even in the home, where it's a power over dynamic,
yeah,
where there's somebody who has higher authority over somebody else, who makes decisions over somebody else. And therefore, the person in the higher position, usually their needs get met. Usually the decisions go in their favor. And when you think about the classroom, it is kind of expected that the teacher's needs will trump students' needs.
right.
And, whether we want to believe that or not, and we can do what we can to accommodate. But at the end of the day, I was educated that as a teacher, like my classroom, my rules, my
Yep,
call.
yep.
And what we don't realize is that paradigm creates so much disconnection. And so in my next slide here, I just have like an example. I found an old picture of back when I first graduated from Teachers College, and one of my first like contract positions.
Yeah,
And for the most part, I was loving my job and having a great time with students because I got into the job because I love kids.
right.
But fast forward to, this picture came from my last position I was teaching, where I was teaching
Ah,
the arts, and
yeah,
this was in a grade 1 classroom. And
yeah,
this youngster was one of many who helped me to wake up to the paradigms that create that disconnection, that create a lot of stress. And she had said something, and if anybody wants to know more of the story, I won't get into it, but it's on my website under articles, because I wrote an article about my experience learning with this grade 1 student. um,
ah,
but in her eyes, when I responded in a way that was not connecting, that was very disconnecting, and in her eyes of sadness and shame, I witnessed myself, and I heard myself, and I was like, this isn't why I got into teaching,
right,
not to embarrass and shame a child.
right.
And so, where's this coming from? Why would I be doing this? Particularly when, on a like a little side note, I mean, one of the promises I made to myself when I was 7, after an adult shamed me, was that, I would never do that. I would never
Right.
forget what it's like to be a child. And
Yes.
so that has been at the foundation of my adult life, whether I'm parenting or teaching, to never forget what it was like to be a child. And so I'm like, so who's doing this, and where's this coming from? And that's when I started a lot of introspection. And that's also at the same time when, and NVC came into my life, and it really felt like ask and you shall receive. And this
Yeah,
was what I received. I was asking the questions: why am I behaving this way? Why is my behavior creating disconnection and psychological and emotional harm to children? And what can I do about it? And
yeah,
rather than, my best strategy at this point was trying to just overlook or ignore behavior I didn't enjoy. And
yeah.
we know that ignoring behavior, that, challenging or difficult behavior, isn't helpful either.
Hmm.
Then you were steeping on negligence, and we don't want to go there either.
No.
Um, so then I had a whole new way of, um, I started to realize what was at the cause. And what was really was that, I was fueling the fires that I was trying to put out.
Wow.
Right. And why was that? It wasn't conscious. There was two parts. One is whether we're a teacher or in the parenting dynamic and adult child relationship, um,
Hmm.
we teach the way we were taught.
Yes.
And
Amen.
because most teachers are students who enjoyed the system,
Yeah.
who succeeded in the system. I don't know any teacher who goes, man, I hated school.
Right.
Right? Because because the ones who didn't like school, after graduation, they're never stepping in there again unless they have to
That's
as a
right.
parent. And
That's
even
right.
they don't even sometimes want to come in, right? And so we're teaching again from that same experience that we had as a student. And we're expecting now, like we were good students and we did what we were told and we followed the rules and we did our homework and we were successful. Now, what's wrong with kids? Why can't they do what I did? And so a lot of us are functioning from those experiences of what was done to us. We pass on. Same in parenting, right? We parent the way we were parented unless we choose otherwise. And same with teaching, unless we get more conscious over what is connecting versus disconnecting. And what I didn't realize until I started taking training in nonviolent communication is that many of the beliefs and practices, those classroom management strategies
Yep.
were really about controlling behavior.
Yep.
It had nothing to do with connecting to the needs of a fellow human being. It was
No.
about controlling behavior. And so that's why I was also finding it so exhausting because I'm trying to control behavior. And as the years went on, it seemed to be that those strategies to control behavior management, I mean, that's what it was called, behavior mod. I had a behavior mod class. And I just look back and think, how come it never occurred to me back then? This sounds really violent. We're going to learn strategies to modify people's behavior. Like, but it
Right.
never, I'm just like, okay, behavior management. Yep, this is one of my courses I have to take.
Yes.
And so and then I didn't realize that, oh, so many of the things I say and do, the way I interpret behavior, the way I take things personally and then respond accordingly is fueling the fires I'm trying to put out.
Yep.
Yeah, and I really want to iterate that in no way is this blame, because
No.
I wasn't a bad teacher. It wasn't my fault. I'm not
Right.
I'm not designating blame like, oh, the problems today is those teachers. No, the problem today is the lack of training we
Right.
have to evolve our education system to a more compassionate and collaborative one instead of a power over one. So instead of power over, power with. Right.
Love
And
that.
it's very possible because I know now.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. You've done it.
yeah. So I love, the teacher in me, of course, I have to make concrete manipulatives. I have to like can't just sit here and talk at everybody. So I have these visuals that I use in my workshops, and hopefully this shows up okay in the webinar. Or it might not have enough space here, but can you see? This is a
Yes.
cardboard frame I've made, and at the
Yes.
top I have the words "What's wrong." And I don't know about you, Walter, but when I have been teaching for
Hmm.
all those years, when there was a challenge came up with a behavior I didn't enjoy, um,
Yes.
right away, without consciously realizing it, most of us have been educated to approach a perceived problem with the question, "What's wrong?"
Right.
Right? Whether we're out on yard duty, whether we're, teaching in the classroom, whether we're in the staff room,
Yeah.
when something isn't going the way we enjoy, the question is often in our heads, what's wrong? And the challenge with that question is often there's only two answers. It's either you or it's me. It's us or it's them,
Yep.
right? And that's the foundation of war. That's
Wow.
war. That's a war making frame.
Wow.
Right? So what we don't realize is that we're walking through the halls, our classrooms, doing our jobs with this like lens that scans around, scanning radar system with really the frame of what's wrong.
Yeah.
And as soon as something is out of alignment that we don't enjoy, that's our question. What's wrong? Is it you? Is it me? Is it us? Is it them? And often
Hmm.
the ways we respond are often, because if we're in the frame of what's wrong, we often receive something that we don't enjoy because we're taking it personally. Oh, so it's me that's wrong? No, it's not me that's wrong. Let me tell you, it's you that's wrong. And then this conflict inducing conversations can start to happen. Um, and I know you might not be able to see this one much either, but the frame that I show people, that is the question really is not what's wrong, but what's needed.
Yeah, look at that.
And when we look through this frame, when we see something that seems to be, off and needs our
Yeah,
attention,
yeah,
we're looking at it through this frame, it's quite different. And so I'll show you through some of my slides here. So I'm inviting people who are listening or watching just to
yeah.
really feel the shift of these two questions.
It's
When
amazing.
my last assignment, I was the teacher who taught music and drama. So I was the teacher with the cart racing down the hall, trying to get to the next class in time so that the classroom teacher could go for his or her prep time.
Yep.
And when I would go racing down that hall, and I would always sort of pause outside the classroom and take a few deep breaths, get myself orientated over what I'm teaching this class and what I need to remember. And of course, the first things that would always pop up was doing the inventory of the kids who are difficult, and what did I incorporate in my lesson plan in order to prevent, this child or that child from, doing whatever it is I typically, that typically happens that I don't enjoy.
Hmm.
So my question was always something like, how can I control these kids? Have I got everything in place? Have I got my manipulatives right on deck so that I don't give them any downtime to start goofing off? Have I got this? Have I got that?
Right.
Right. And it was all about controlling children. But when I shifted to the NBC frame and shifted to, instead of what's wrong, but what's needed, my question then became, how can I connect with these fellow human beings? These fellow human beings who have similar feelings and needs as I do.
I can't think of a better example than a specials teacher, a music teacher, having to come in and try to establish themselves every 45 minutes in a different classroom. That's a challenge.
Yeah, to reorientate. And so,
Yeah.
and in my photo here, I have again props that I take when I'm teaching, depending the context, but for the most part, and I have them here with me as well.
Ah, great.
And in nonviolent communication, Marshall Rosenberg assigned this jackal. It's kind of like a wolf or a jackal, um, and this jackal represents the frame of judgment, the frame of power over. And so when I'm talking about a power over situation or a judgment situation, often I have this, or even I have my little jackal ears that I wear so that
Yeah.
people can see the visual. Because if we just have words out there, it can be hard to kind of grasp it all. So sometimes I use my visual so that people can see the difference between um, the two frames. So this is our judgment frame. This is when we're looking at people of what's wrong. How do they need fixed? What do I need to do to change the situation so that I can enjoy myself better? And let's face it, if we really get honest, a lot of times when we're having those meetings about children and behavior,
Yeah.
yes, obviously we have their best interest in mind, but a lot of times it's strategies to change behavior so that we enjoy them more. And we say to them, we wrap that up in a package called respect.
Hmm.
We want you to behave in a way, and we're going to call that being respectful,
Yeah.
instead of, for me, respect is when we're aware of each other's feelings and needs. And respect isn't something that's given, it's something that's earned. So we're just being aware of sort of the jackal beliefs and the jackal language that we have. That's this power over language that is very conflict producing. And then Marshall created, or picked the giraffe. And he picked the giraffe for the compassionate language because the giraffe has the largest heart of all land mammals, and it has a long neck. that it can see up high and often see a broader or bigger perspective. And
Love
so
it.
it's a great representation. So in the
Yes.
NVC world, if I'm talking with people, sometimes they'll say, oh, like my jackal came out really strong. So my judgments. And then they'll say, like, oh, I just wish I could talk giraffe all the time. And giraffe is this collaborative connecting frame where we see each other using strategies to get needs met. So
Hmm.
in each and every moment, whether we're 5 or 55 or any age,
Yeah.
humans are using strategies to get needs met. And when we, start seeing them through that frame and getting compassionately curious, then we stop taking everyone's behavior personally and we can start connecting and supporting each other in collectively meeting needs instead of, power over and trumping. So we can function in a power with system. Now, I
Yes.
always say to people when I talk about the hierarchical structure, that doesn't mean, say if I'm in corporate situation, I'm not suggesting that you need to get rid of your hierarchy. Um, the hierarchy for me, the purpose of it would simply be for delegating responsibility. So even in the school system, students, you're here and here's your responsibilities. Here's what you're holding. Teachers, you're here, you're overseeing them and this. And admin, you're here and you're holding this and overseeing them, who's overseeing them. And so it's a support system and a who's holding, not who has more power over, whose needs are met over somebody else's needs. And the good news is, I mean, I've seen a huge shift in that over the past 30 years. So even though some people might be struggling over difficult behavior or things they don't enjoy about education. One thing that I have experienced, I don't know, I'm speaking as a teacher in Canada, north of Toronto, but I definitely have seen an evolution in beliefs where there's a strong attempt to recognize children's feelings and needs and to try to meet them. It's difficult to do when we're still in a frame of what's wrong or we're still in our in our jackal of judgments of
Yeah.
what's wrong, and it's making the internal shift so that we can support that external drive of where I think a lot of us want to go in education. I don't know
Yeah.
anybody personally who doesn't want to make education a better, more effective system for everybody, including
Right.
students.
Right.
Right. So I just want to really add that in for educators listening that this isn't about criticizing or shaming. We've all been doing the best we
Mm.
can with
Yeah.
what we have. And when we know more, then we can do more. Yeah, and so what I just wanted to make sure that, my invitation for people is to start really realizing that what weighs us down the most in the isn't the classroom itself, isn't what those things that, at the beginning of a workshop, I have teachers list off what is it that you're not enjoying, and we make this, kind of long list of all the things they're not enjoying. And so much of it is even similar to what you alluded to at the beginning, is the frame through which we're functioning and
Yeah.
how we're interpreting these and what it is we tell ourselves. And
Yes.
so, for a perfect example, is or one thing that a belief system that is heavily steeped in education. And in fact, I tell this story in the corporate world because I help them to realize that a lot of the problems that businesses or corporations are having are from the belief systems they learned in school.
Yeah.
Okay. So a lot of corporate is basically school part two.
Wow.
Right? And so, an example can be that I'll offer the belief that something that is a common culture belief in my experience, and that I get a lot of opposition to when I do a workshop in any context, is
Hmm.
when I tell them that um, the story or the belief that you can hurt my feelings. A lot of people are attached to the belief you can hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
And being attached to that belief ensures that you're a victim to somebody else's behavior. It ensures that you're going to blame. And when we blame, we are now victimized and we are now dependent upon somebody else to change in order for us to feel better. So a perfect teacher example, I'm going to share this story, and it comes. It was a huge pivotal moment in my life in my teaching when like the light switch really went off. when I was doing before this job, I was doing special ed, and I was the the support teacher for literacy skills for students from grades 4 to 6. And I had a grade 4 student come to my room for literacy support. And when I announced to him like what we were going to do, he was like, "No, I'm not doing it." He had the hoodie over his head. He was looking down, wouldn't make eye contact. That typical child who's not wanting to engage. But when I'm in my domination culture paradigm, when I'm in my power over, which I was like, I got to show him who's boss. I got to let him know he's the teacher. I got to let him know he can't get away with this, and so I was using a lot of my strategies of like sort of threatening and bribing, all those things we do, where
Yeah.
we, punishment, threaten punishment or bribe with rewards. Both of
Yeah.
them are controlling over. We think
Yes.
reward is a great thing. Rewards is still about controlling behavior. It's just the opposite side of the same coin. And so I was doing that, and then I pushed him and I pushed him, and finally he looked up at me and said, "Mrs. McPherson, you are the worst teacher in the world."
Ouch.
Now, if I'm in the belief that someone can hurt my feelings, if I'm attached to that belief, now I'm a victim.
Right.
And I had a moment where it's like I watched myself. I was watching this whole interaction like a movie. And I was like, something's got to give, because my default setting would have been, "Listen here, young man, you can't speak to a teacher like that. That's disrespectful. You go to the office." And he would have got punished for being disrespectful. Would my behavior be looked at? No. Would it look like that, that I interrogated him, threatened him, and all the things that I did that facilitated him in behaving that way? Now, we're not condoning it. We're not making excuses for it.
No.
I'm inviting people to look at this as cause and effect, not right or wrong, good or bad. But in that moment, I decided I didn't want to be in that confrontational frame anymore. So I have no idea where it came from, but somewhere within me, something came up, and I interrupted that pattern, and I looked at him with the most compassionate look, and I said, "You could be right."
Yeah.
And instantly he diffused, and instantly he sunk into his chair and was emotional. And
Well,
there was no more fight, right? Because retaliation is the first act of war, and I didn't retaliate, so there was no war.
it's fascinating as you tell that story because you said very explicitly a few minutes ago, we personalize things. But the story you just shared also gave the student permission to let go and not let it be personal. It just neutralized both sides.
Yeah. Well, and in my experience through the NBC frame, him saying that he was using a strategy to get a need met.
Hmm.
Right. So we talk about that in NBC about feelings and needs, and painful feelings is the sign of an unmet need. And we
Yeah.
use strategies to get our needs met. And that was the strategy he used. And he used it, because he was pushed to that point where it's like, I wasn't hearing him. I wasn't hearing his needs. And
Right.
even he likely at, the age of 9 didn't have a lot of consciousness around it, but
Yeah.
all he knew is he was in emotional pain. And of course, eventually I did find out, because he was a recent student. I didn't understand his level of competency. I was asking him to do something that was far beyond his capacity.
Ah.
And he was not only not wanting to deal with any more failure, but he was also deeply traumatized from recently being put into foster care. So there was
Oh.
so many things for him.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
when I look back at that, I'm like, you know what? I think he was right. In that moment, I was the worst teacher in the world. I just didn't know it. And I'm not taking that personally, but greater self awareness is the key, right?
Yes.
If I blamed him, I would still be in that lack of self awareness, continuing to struggle with the same struggles.
Yeah.
So here's another example that a lot of people will tell me about, that they don't enjoy managing conflict. And then for me, that was probably, and I'm saying past, I've recently resigned. Last year I resigned from teaching. I'll get into that maybe a little bit down the road,
Yeah.
on how that came to be. But managing conflict was definitely the thing that I dreaded the most. And I hated the most about yard duty, because that's where most of the conflict happens, is, kids fighting out in the yard. And I would be like walking away. I didn't see anything. I didn't see anything.
Right.
you know,
Right.
and again, through the frame of what's wrong, Why is conflict so draining for teachers? Well, here it is, because we're suddenly now the cop. Who's right? Who's wrong? Who's lying? Who's telling the truth? What will the consequences be? Who gets punished? Who doesn't? Do parents get called? What forms need to be filled out? Right. And especially the last one. I mean, the longer I got into teaching, I'm like, if there's one more form, I'm going to scream. Right. But in domination culture paradigm, when we don't learn how to educate each other and meet each other, educate with each other and meet each other's needs, we tend to rely on policy. More rules, because rules are about controlling behavior.
Yeah,
Boundaries are about our controlling our own behavior. Rules are about controlling other people's behavior.
yeah,
So when children misbehave, we keep adding more rules.
yeah,
More rules means more policing. More policing is more exhausting. We add more policies, we add more forms, and we
yeah.
think we're protecting each other through more policies and more forms, but we're actually disconnecting each other even more. We're draining ourselves from the job, and we're disconnecting more because we're spending more time on paperwork than connecting with a fellow human being who was trying to get their needs met and didn't have the skills to do it.
And just on a personal note, none of us signed up to be a cop. None of us
Yeah.
signed up to be filing paperwork all day. This is
Yeah.
not why we get into teaching.
Absolutely. And again, that's why so many find it draining, because they're spending all this time doing stuff that they didn't know this was going to be part of the gig. And I think if some of us knew, we might not have got into it. You know? And as I say, it's gotten much more, it from when I first started teaching to last year, the paper, I got out of special ed because I was spending way more time with paper than with human beings. And I'm like, I
Yeah,
can't do this anymore.
yeah,
And I was supposed to be servicing kids by spending hours of time filling out paperwork about education plans that teachers never even looked at anyway, and
yeah,
parents barely, everyone just signed paper and carried on. And most professionals, most teachers just kept trying to do the best they could meeting a child's needs. So it might sound a little political, there was good intention behind it, but the more we just kept making it so much more complicated,
yeah.
and more paperwork, less time actually supporting children.
True.
So so then, through the frame of what's needed, now we've got two students fighting. Now our questions shift, and first it's always about stopping and taking a deep breath. Why? Because stopping to take a deep breath interrupts our default setting. It helps to regulate our nervous system. It helps us to interrupt, the thinking that's going to be triggering for us. It's sort of like that. Okay, it's like what I had with my student Evan. It's like I took a deep breath and I'm like, I'm not going to do it the same way I've always done it and want something different.
Right.
Right? I've got to interrupt this. So we take a deep breath to invite different. Right?
Mhm.
And we get clear, what am I feeling? This is the self empathy part. This is taking care of ourselves. And I cannot support two children fighting if I am not self regulated.
Amen.
Yeah. So I need to make sure I take just that, be able to have that few seconds of taking a deep breath and getting clear. Okay. And noticing if I'm triggered, again, interrupting the pattern to think that I am irritated because these two children are fighting. Instead, I'm irritated because there's some need not being met for me right now.
Yeah.
And what is that? And the wonderful gift is, the more I did this, the more I started to verbalize it out loud, so that I was role modeling to children what was
Ah,
going on for me,
yeah.
not only so that they could learn about self-regulation, but that they could also stop owning my emotions,
Wow.
right? So they see Mrs. McPherson irritated. Oh, some of them might go, oh, there I go, I'm a bad kid again. And I would even give them a visual where I would put one hand on my forehead and one hand on the back, and I would take a deep breath. And this is actually great for your nervous system anyway.
Yeah.
But it gave them a visual of like, oh, here Mrs. McPherson goes. This is when she starts telling her internal dialogue out loud. Okay, so
Yeah.
they know this is me now talking. I go, man, I'm just feeling so irritated right now because I'm just longing to teach this lesson that I have, and
Yeah.
now I'm spending time, and like I would say like out loud what was happening for me, and they'd be like, oh, and sometimes I might say like, oh, I'm wondering like what I did wrong, because again, that's where my head was going. What am I doing wrong as a teacher?
Right.
Because
Yes.
good teachers, kids all get along and they have a quiet classroom, right?
Right.
So that's what good teachers are. And so these, children are ruining my belief system around what makes me a good teacher. So I might even
Mhm.
come up with something. I would say something like, now I'm feeling like I've got this judgment that I'm not a good teacher. And sometimes like their jaws would drop and they'd be like, you're really thinking, like, you really believe this? And I'm like, I know. And one time I had a student go, no, Mrs. McPherson, you're a really good teacher. And I'm like, you know what?
Ah.
I think I'll pick your story instead because my story is way too painful. And so anyway, so it's that self-regulating,
Yeah.
and then we have the ability to do it for them. We
Mhm.
cannot give what we do not have. And if we are not self-regulated, if we're not empathizing with our own emotions and unmet needs, then we
Mhm.
can't do it for anybody else. And it's empathy that is the key to connection.
Yeah.
Without empathy, this whole process is just a formality that won't work. It's just a checklist of things to do, but it won't work
Yeah.
until we go inward and really navigate from a place of sincere empathy. We cannot navigate outside of this frame of what's wrong to what's needed.
Right.
Um, so another huge frame to remember our invitation is, I talked about no one can hurt your feelings. That it's really when someone says or does something you don't enjoy and you have that painful feeling,
Yeah.
it's a trigger to your internal whatever's going on internally. And that's actually why now when I think back of it, loop back, that's why I told you the Evan story, because think of how many teachers, if a student said, you're the worst teacher in the world, would
Mhm.
react one way and I
Right.
reacted another. And if
Yeah.
if Evan saying you're the worst teacher in the world was the cause of my pain, then every teacher who hears you're the worst teacher in the world would be in equal amount of pain.
Yeah.
Right. So we know it's not, because someone can say you're the worst teacher in the world. They could say you're the worst facilitator in the world.
Yeah.
And from my frame, I would be like, well, thanks for sharing your experience. That's your truth. It might not be my truth. So I'm not taking people's experience or perceptions of me personally.
Yeah.
So I know that if I do get upset, it's not the cause, it's the trigger, that there's something in me that's happening internally that's letting me know there's an unmet need here. So here's another paradigm that conflict is not bad. And in education in particular, kids start fighting. It's like get the hose, put out the fire right away.
Right. Right.
And we don't give them the skills to navigate conflict themselves.
Yeah.
Conflict is simply a breakdown in communication. It is people not enjoying the strategy the other is using. It's an opportunity for shared understanding, collaboration, and connection. And I would say this to my students when they, because I would often get the class where they're coming in from recess or they finish lunch or whatever's happening, and
Yeah.
there's a conflict fresh on the plate here. It's just like it's
Yep.
hot. Here it is.
Yep.
you know and so I'm like, oh, do I hear a conflict? And then I would teach them to say, oh, conflict is an opportunity for connection.
Love that.
And so I would help them to reframe that, nobody's bad here, nobody's needs to punish here. It's about understanding feelings and needs, and
Yeah.
that when somebody took your ball, it was a strategy to get a need met. We're not condoning it, but we're going to get compassionately curious, and instead of fighting with strategies and punishing strategies, we're
Yep.
going to meet people at the level of need.
Yep.
And conflict can only happen at the level of strategy.
Yep.
Conflict is about fighting over strategies. But when we come underneath and meet at the level of need, no conflict can reside there. So it's shifting to meeting people at the level of need. So, what I've really started to recognize is that when children were dealing with conflict, we were punishing kids for not having the skills we never taught them.
Ouch.
And why? Because they were never taught to us, right? They were never taught to us. And for the most part, if we were good students, we
Mhm.
likely didn't deal with conflict that much.
Right.
So not only did we not get the skills to navigate conflict, we didn't experience conflict because we
Yeah.
suppressed our needs for love and approval, for a
Yep.
sense of belonging, for
Yep.
connection. And that's again why we did so well in the system.
Yes.
We complied and conformed well. And so when you do that, you tend to
Mhm.
not meet up with conflict near as much. So we didn't experience conflict in school, and when we did, somebody else, a higher authority, trumped us and said, "This is the way it's going to happen. You sit here, you sit there, you go to the office, and you two aren't going to get to play together for blah blah. You're not getting recess. You're this, you're that." And it's tragic because here we are punishing children for skills we never taught them. Yeah. So instead of punishing children when they were in conflict, I saw myself as a coach, as somebody to say, okay, these children need coaching on how to hear one another. And there's a whole methodology around that. And any educators out there who want to book me to help you with the approach that I did to help children hear each other and
Yeah.
help give them the skills,
Yeah.
just reach out to me, and I'd love to come and teach it because it worked like a charm. It
Yeah.
worked every time.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Another draining challenge for teachers, again, is the painful emotions, right?
Mm.
Connected to the conflict as well. So you're teaching and somebody's crying or
Yep.
somebody's angry, those sort of typical, the two ones we don't enjoy, the sad and the angry, and lots of everything in between. And again, we've been educated very unconsciously and unintentionally that
Mhm.
painful emotions are bad. I mean, I don't know about when you were little, Walter, but when I was little, I heard, put those tears away or I'll give you something to cry about,
Yep.
right? I wasn't allowed to use the word hate. I wasn't allowed to be angry.
No.
I had to be what? Happy and grateful. That
Yep.
was my job as a child. Happy and grateful, happy and grateful. And relatively quiet, please, too. So happy, grateful, and quiet. Those were the behaviors that were valued, and that's when I
Yes.
got love and attention and appreciation. And so for me, I had the capacity to do that. Not all children do, and I
No.
think especially with more technology, the whole like comply, conform, staying still, being quiet, those things can be even more compromised for many children,
Mhm.
divergent.
Mhm.
So back to painful emotions. So again, somebody's crying. What's our question? What's wrong? And
Right.
we function with a crying child from what's wrong and how can we fix it? What's the fixing? Get them to stop crying and everything's better.
Yeah.
So painful emotions have always been something we've tried to get rid of, put strategies in to
Mm.
get kids back to being happy. I know the last school I was at, there was this whole money put into an emotional awareness and intelligence program, which was great. And there was like emotion zones, and kids could start labeling their emotions and identifying their emotions. The challenge was it still came back to the goal being get yourself back into the green zone. How can you get into one of the emotions that are in the green box?
Yeah.
And so yes, we made progress because now we're actually allowing children to have words around emotions, feel their feelings, label their feelings. So we're making progress, Walter, and I
Yeah.
celebrate that. I
Yes.
celebrate that. It's now what do we do with those painful emotions instead of yeah, I understand you're angry, and the child's allowed to say, I'm angry. Yes, you're angry. And instead, we still want to go to how do we get them to stop being angry? How do we fix this?
Right.
Instead, my invitation is to teach people that painful emotions are not bad, they're messengers. And so the next step is teaching children that when they have a painful emotion, to stop and take a deep breath and go inward. But we've educated them because we were educated to go outward. I have a painful emotion. What's wrong? I know it's Walter because he wouldn't let me play with him, and it's his fault.
Yep.
And there's often rescuers or teachers who are there to reinforce that and say something like, "Oh, dear Walter, we play with everybody. Adults don't do this, but we expect children
Right.
to be nice and play with everybody. And that wasn't nice. And so now, Walter, you need to do what? You have to apologize.
I
Forced apologies are like nails down a chalkboard for me. That is emotional dysfunction right there. We're creating dysfunctional relationships for children when we require forced apologies. And so it's instead, so they're educated. Painful emotion, whose fault, who needs to change, and who needs to apologize. And until they do, I'm a victim.
Yeah.
right? The victim drama cycle.
Yeah.
So instead, child's got painful emotions. Yeah, let's give them the language. Yep, they're saying I'm angry. They have the words for it. Okay, great. And the next question is, what's your anger trying to tell you?
Mhm.
Right? What need is not being met for you right now? What's happening for you right now? Go inward. So they're going to stop going outward into blame. They're going to go inward to self introspection, self
Yeah.
awareness. And self awareness is the path to freedom. Self awareness is what gets us out of the, the struggles and the challenges that we're in, not the blame game.
And I'm probably getting ahead of you here, Jill, and I'm watching the time. I don't want to hold you up. But as an adult coming from an Irish Catholic upbringing, nothing would set off my anger more than having somebody look me in the eye and say no. I just told them what I needed or what I expected. No. Oh man, you talk about just unleashing all that conformity and that upbringing of you need to toe the line and you need to do what you're told. So
Yeah.
as the adults today, that can be a very counterproductive reaction.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you brought that up, Walter, because that's a lot of the self-empathy component.
Yeah.
When we're triggered, think of how our inner child who like was shamed for saying no, wasn't allowed to say no, had huge consequences for saying no.
Yeah.
That part wants to speak up and let the child now in front of us know that this isn't okay. And that's what contributes to this cycle, this generational passing down patterns, that if we don't become self-aware, we pass down what was done to us. We do what was done to us, right? And so getting that self-awareness of probably when you as a teacher or administrator heard no and you could feel your blood boil, that had so much to do with what happened to you, with
Yep.
what your experiences were, not just how you were educated in teachers college, but how you were educated in your family, in your culture, in your religion, in your community,
Yeah.
right? And so much of that inner childhood wounding or trauma or significant events that happened where you got those messages of what's okay and what's not, and that really can compromise our ability to even hear or be with the student in front of us. And oftentimes, instead of navigating a person in front of us, whether it's a child, a colleague, a parent, administrator, many times we are not actually communicating with the person in front of us. We are communicating with the story we have about them. We're
Wow.
communicating with the story we have about ourselves.
Yes.
And so when we can start that self-awareness and self-empathy makes us realize, oh, I am not even really listening to this kid. I'm too busy, remembering about, blah, blah, blah. And like I remember being so triggered over my big thing to heal was my belief that a loud classroom was a bad classroom, that,
Ah,
a loud classroom was a teacher who wasn't doing a good job. And my
yeah.
last assignment teaching music and drama, let me tell you, you can't do those subjects quietly. I mean, being loud should be a celebration that there's a lot of learning here because I hear instruments, because I hear, kids in groups and creating, you know, um, skits and talking and laughing and there's
Yeah.
lots of learning going on. And I had to constantly deal with my personal trigger of when it got loud, that this was this as the story I had in my head, that this isn't means I'm not a good teacher. So it's really bringing self awareness to our triggers and interrupting the default setting that this loud classroom is, the cause of your pain. I mean, yes, loud classrooms can cause like physical headache or something like that, but the
Yeah.
emotional pain, the emotional trigger of
Yeah.
where's this really coming from? And what am I telling myself and about the other? And so really my invitation, just to wrap up here is
Yeah.
is for that I realized how much what I was believing and what happened to me, as a child, as a student, what I learned in teachers college, my cultural values that I was steeped in, the system of a hierarchical system, all of these things were contributing to my disconnect and stress I had in my teaching job. And I mean, it didn't switch overnight. Let me tell you, Walter, it took the first
No.
couple years of training where I could really start to feel the shift, and notice, hey, that would have triggered me before, and now I'm good. Or that I would have said this before, but listen to hear me. Listen, I'm calmly responding this way instead,
Right.
and really celebrating. And after about 2 years of it, then I had the capacity where I started integrating it all into my lessons. And
Yeah.
so, especially in drama, I
Yeah.
pitched the skits and we went from role play to real play. And they gave me the material. They gave me the things that trigger them and upset them and they wanted skills to navigate. And so, I made up these cards where it was like setting characters, and challenge. And then they created a they acted it out. And when they got to the part where people would be typically violent, like it's your fault, no, blah, and do these things that are very disconnecting, then I would go cut, and then they would have to rewind and NVC it, and they had to empathize it. They had to, like, to find a new frame in order to deal with it. So they would literally do the walk backwards. They loved that part, and then and then they would do it through the frame so they could really experience the two
Yeah.
and the shift. And it was just such a joy to start hearing children like 4 and 5 year olds when I go in for kindergarten music, and somebody would be like crying and they'd be like, oh, do you have a need for a friend? Do you have and they would start, supporting
Yeah.
each other
Yeah.
through this frame instead of what's wrong, what's needed. And it was just, some people would say, oh, it must have been harder with younger children to teach this. No, actually, kindergartens learned it the fastest. Why?
Right.
Because they had less baggage,
Yep.
less programming to unprogram. And
Yep.
my experience is most children show up with a frame of nonviolence, and we soon educate them otherwise. Unknowingly and tragically, we do so. And even
Hmm.
Marshall Rosenberg said that he believed that this was the language of life, that if it wasn't for the domination culture paradigms that we soon get steeped into, particularly
Hmm.
once we reach school age,
Yeah.
this is the language we were born with. And I totally saw proof of that because I'm like, how is it that the younger the children, the faster they can do this? And that was the answer for me, is that they could do it because they were connecting to the language that they were born with, that we are all born with as humans.
It's amazing stuff. And I love the fact that you're also training corporate leaders. Rightfully so. This is important information for anybody in any role. But what we love most about you, Jill, is that you're an educator first. And I don't think it comes out any louder or clearer than with the visuals, because
Yeah.
so much of what we're talking about is in our heads and in our hearts. And when you pull out the visuals, it just stops us. It makes you stop and think, wait a minute, get out of my head and
Mhm.
don't go back to what I learned in childhood or that pain that I'm still responding to. But be in the moment, because Jill is showing me a nonverbal cue, a visual that's telling me there's another way. Only an
Mhm.
educator would come up with it. It's brilliant. It's like, yes, that even in the moment of a crisis where people are upset with each other, you pull out a visual and everyone's going to stop and go, oh, wait a minute, time
Yeah.
out,
Yeah.
reset. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. And just to finish up, I realized that I didn't explain why it is I'm no longer in the classroom.
Oh, yeah.
I was actually loving my job. And a lot of people, might not make it to retirement date because they weren't loving their job. And I absolutely was loving my job.
Mhm.
And my administrators decided they were going to change my job to something else in the new year. And it would be something that I would not enjoy. And the scheduling would change. When I was teaching part time, and I was also doing freelance work for an organization teaching in high schools, mental health stuff and communication skills in high schools when I wasn't
Yeah.
teaching. And
Yeah.
so scheduling, job, everything was like this, it couldn't have been worse. They couldn't have come up with, and a portable, like it couldn't come up with anything worse. And when the description kept getting worse and worse and worse, I knew, okay, there's a higher power here that's saying, you've had your turn. You've had 8 years using NVC in the classroom. You've had 8 years of learning it. You've got your research. You've got your proof. Now go
Yes.
out and find a bigger classroom to teach this to. And so I I decided I needed to, as sad as I was to leave this great job, I knew it was time to go. And as soon as I put in my resignation, um, things started happening. People started
Yeah.
reaching out, and
Yeah.
I do a lot of freelance work for different organizations as well as independent on myself by myself. But
Yeah.
yeah, I had a wonderful opportunity to teach managers at Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment in Toronto. Um,
Wonderful.
some communication skills, and hopefully I'll be back in the fall with them. And it's been lovely. It's been, because this is really relationship. So I'm
Yes.
teaching the beliefs and the paradigms and the um, skills that we need to connect instead of disconnect. So it's relevant in business and corporate. It's relevant in education. It's relevant in the home. My number one passion, though, is getting in front of educators, because so much of this, if we can shift this for our next generation of adults and workers,
Yes.
parents,
Yes.
we're gonna shift things really fast if we can get to educators, so that we're not passing down what was done to us. We're interrupting those patterns, and we're also, let me tell you, going to love your job when you shift out of what's wrong to what's needed.
It's just wonderful stuff. And the hour just flew by, always
It just flew
does.
by.
Yeah, but and yet I know we only scratched the surface. You have so much
Yeah.
more to offer. This sounds awful. I'm so glad you left the classroom to be with us and to share with educators everywhere, because you have a gift. It's so
Yeah.
much
Thank
more. So
you. Yeah.
grateful for that. And if you'd like to know more, whether you're live here or watching the recording, and you'd like to get in touch with Jill, number one, she's wonderfully responsive. So if you need to just have a conversation up front, you'll be glad you did. And then if you'd like her to come and work with your staff or your faculty or your organization, she's very available. She's as great in person as she is here on Zoom, so you will not be disappointed. Jill,
Great.
thank you for being you.
Thank you. And thank you for what you're doing for education, Walter. I'm so grateful, and I keep sending educators your way, because we really appreciate what you're doing to help support, evolving education, for better, for kids, for students, for parents, for the whole school community.
It's an
So thank
honor.
you.
Oh, absolutely. And when we crossed paths the end of last summer, I had no idea you had just moved out of the classroom. So I just thank my lucky stars that we found each other. So good stuff all around.
Great. All right. Thanks, Walter.